because without all of that conditioning, there is just the purity of the essence of who you are.
The body doesn't lie.
We are all able to connect in our own quantum field in our own way.
The universe exists in terms of vibration, frequency, energy, light, resonance, and it responds accordingly.
And we are shifting the quantum field. So yeah, it's amazing.
Yes.
Welcome to Mindfully Sovereign, the podcast that invites you to reclaim your feminine self-authority and unleash the abundance within. My name is Sapha, I am your host, and I'm here to help guide you past your limiting beliefs and into the heart of your unwavering and undeniable power. This podcast is all about reclaiming your feminine self-authority, learning the art of self-seduction, and awakening your inner goddess so that you can become an aligned match to your most abundant life yet. So grab a cup of tea, get cozy, and get ready to become mindfully sovereign.
All right, welcome back and happy Monday. I am so excited to be here with all of you today, and of course with my special guest. So I have yet one more amazing woman for the Women Thrive Summit. This particular season has been filled with everyone that I've just connected with and who I know is going to be able to bring you something wonderful so that you can work on your self-development and your personal empowerment. So today I have Kate. And I'm going to let her, as per usual, introduce herself so that she can tell us a little bit more about who she is, what she does, and all the good things. So Kate, welcome to the show and tell us a little bit about you and the work that you do.
Thank you so much. I am delighted to be here. So my name is Kate Mayer and I am a Quantum Transformation Psychotherapist. So what I do is I help people to heal at the deepest level of their trauma, their conditioning. So we're getting right to the root issue, helping them to align with who they are at their core selves, helping them to step into their sovereignty. Because without all of that conditioning, there is just the purity of the essence of who you are. And so quantum healing is the most amazing tool at shifting all those layers of trauma and conditioning, which are getting in your way and stopping you from stepping into your success and your purpose and stepping into all the possibilities that might be out there for you from that space. So that's how I work.
I love it. And thank you so much for using the word sovereignty. It just gets me so excited. But I love this. So I am a firm believer that the depth of the work is what really starts to create the transformation inside of us. So I love everything that you do and everything that you stand for. I'm someone who likes to look at the nuance and the depth in everything that we converse about. And one of the reasons why is because I know that as things become popular, sometimes ideas take a change or they have a new perspective or there may be misinformation about something. So particularly where quantum is related, there is so much that we can get into. And I'm loving that we get the chance to do that here because I know that there is so much misinformation out there. And because I know that there is so much also, not just misinformation, but behind the curtain, so to speak, things that we don't even know about quantum. So can you give us a little bit about, okay, what exactly are we talking about when we say quantum healing? What does that look like? And also, what does it not actually look like? Maybe that one of the biggest misinformations that you've seen along the way.
Yeah, okay. So basically, there is a collective quantum field. And it contains every possibility out there. And so we can connect into that field and being very intentional and having awareness of what we don't want to have in our being, what energy we want to release, we can do so and release that up and then connect into the energy that we do want to align with and that connects most deeply into our source energy. And that is what quantum healing is in its purity. There are lots of people who are throwing the word quantum around left, right, and center and sort of saying, let's do a quantum meditation or whatever that might be. I mean, we are all able to connect in our own quantum field in our own way. So we can do that through all sorts of different ways and modalities. But I think that quantum word is being thrown out there in a way that is maybe diluting it somewhat. The way that I certainly use it is I use muscle testing. So I don't know if you're aware of what muscle testing is.
Love it.
And kinesiology. And
I mean, by the way, I know, but that doesn't mean that the people who are listening know. So let's talk a little bit about it.
It's a bit of a hard one to describe, but basically, we can, when our bodies are in flow and when there is truth, our muscles respond very differently to when something does not align and when it's a firm no response from our bodies. And so, if you are telling a lie, your muscles will give a firm a very different response to that yes response. And so we can use that ourselves. We can all muscle test and work out what serves us, what our bodies need, what aligns with us, the best course of action for us, all of those sort of things. So and energy has no bounds. So I can test on another person's energy, and I can say, is this the right thing for them? What's at the core of this issue? Where do I need to take this session, and so on. And so I'm constantly muscle testing to work out where we need to go, what their superconscious is telling me that we need to work with first, and how we need to shift all of this. And so a quantum healing session that I will give somebody might come to me with an issue. So let's look at a kind of hypothetical situation. Okay, so say we've got Peter. All right, and he was his parents never gave him any attention. So they're always busy with their own thing. They are, they never sit down with him and find out who he is and what he's about and listen to his stories and all of that sort of thing. Now, as children, we are very egocentric, meaning that we can't really see beyond our own perspective. So if there's something that we want that we are not receiving, we don't think, oh, my parents are a bit useless here. We think that there's something wrong with me. So he is building these belief paradigms around, I am not interesting, no one wants me around, I'm a burden, all of that sort of thing. And so he is then shutting off his heart, building walls, energetic walls around his heart, because he's like, this is really painful. I don't want to be in a place of needing and being dismissed. And he's then developing all sorts of coping behaviors around making conversations all about somebody else, because that's the way that he feels he can connect, and that's a safe space to be in, rather than talking about himself, and so on and so on and so on. And after a lifetime of working, being in that space and building on the energy of doing all of those behaviors, and obviously what happens is when he's doing those behaviors, the really great people aren't really interested in a one-sided relationship, so they kind of drop away, and then it reinforces that, oh, I'm not interested, people abandon me. And so he might come to me for a session, and I'll be like, okay, so people abandon you, there's also he'll be able to say to me where he's at the moment, and then I'll muscle test on the starting place, and we then begin working with his superconscious, and it'll be like, there's all sorts of mindset barriers, there's some belief things here, we need to go to the heart now, and it's shifting all of the layers. And it's amazing, because as you shift one part of the energetic picture, another part over here will shift, and you're just releasing those layers until you get to the deepest core of the issue. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes, it does. Okay, so just reflecting back for our listeners and feeding back into the beautiful aspect of the quantum healing that I'm very familiar with, and as are you. So everything in the universe exists in terms of vibration, frequency, energy, light, resonance, and it responds accordingly, right? So when we talk about the quantum world, there is obviously a science, quantum physics, right? That is very unknown. We don't really know much about yet. We're still exploring to try to understand it. One of the really beautiful parts of this part of quantum physics is that we know that there is a wave-like pattern, to this like existence. And then when we put our attention somewhere, that attention affects the way that something moves, atoms move, blah, blah, and so on and so forth. And so that is the way that we are interconnected in this world. When we talk about quantum healing, we are talking in a sense of affecting a change in the energy within and without. We are talking about moving into that realm of expansion for healing, for transformation, for activation, for attunement, for alignment. And so what you are describing in terms of that muscle testing, what I love about that is I think because part of the egoic self, like you were saying, part of like our ego, listen, I have said this, I think, almost every single episode, but I will say it again regardless, because it's so true. The ego isn't there as this like, oh, if you have an ego, you're a narcissist. If you have an ego, you're only focusing on the self. The ego is there to protect the self. And it has very particular tasks that it likes to do. You know, it assigns boxes, it puts things in certain ways and in certain situations, and it creates narratives and it creates stories. Stories are, or what you were talking about with the example of Peter. Peter had the story like, okay, because my parents didn't listen to me, then that means I'm not worthy. And that means this and this and this. And these are the stories that we create for ourselves. Everyone's are unique to themselves, even if they sound the same, but they affect the way in which we perceive the world around us, because from that perspective, we see the world. And from that view of the world, everything shapes itself around us. And so one thing informs the other. It's like that little pendulum thing that, you know, some people used to have back in the 80s. I'm like, listen, if you're younger than this, you're not going to get the reference. But there was back in the 80s and 90s, there was this like trend of having this thing at people's like CEOs' desks and stuff, where it was like this long line of like dangling little, this is going to sound so weird, but dangling little balls, right? And at one end, you pick one up and you hit all of the other ones, and the one at the other end is going to lift up just as much. So it's kind of like that. It affects everything, right? The reason why I think this is important to talk about, and where I kind of bring us back to that place of misinformation or misconception, or just the potential for us to have deeper conversations about something that we believe we understand, yet remains unquantifiable to a certain extent. Therefore, we have more room for growth and talk within, is the following. One of the truths that I have seen very much exemplified in my life, in my clients' lives, in my family's lives, and pretty much everyone's lives, is that the body doesn't lie. The body tells the truth very much so. We tend to relate as a separate entity from self to body. And we tend to believe that everything that we experience, whether it's trauma, whether it's joy, whether it's happiness, whatever it is that we're pain, that we think that that just exists in our hearts and in our minds. We don't really understand how that exists in our bodies on a somatic level, and in a way that affects our cells and our muscles and our tissue and our tendons and our bones, and every part of who we are is affected by everything else. So there's that effect. That's why I was bringing up the ball thing. It's like you pick one up, it affects all of them. It's going to come out the other end. And so where it comes to the quantum mechanics, the quantum healing, the quantum world, one of the things that we hear very often reflected is quantum meditation. For example, you're going to go and visualize the version of yourself that has the things. I'm only using one of the ones that I'm familiar with. Like, you're going to visualize the version of yourself that has the things already, and therefore you're going to manifest. I always say that's great. I always say that there's a deeper level to go than just that. If I just sit down at my desk every morning and write down I am statements, that's not going to change anything. If I just wake up every morning and imagine that the lived reality that I want is already here, that's a good step, and things are going to respond accordingly. And if there is stuff underneath the surface that we haven't become privy to, that we haven't had a conversation with, and in my realm, we do my methodology is the self-seduction methodology. So if we haven't self-seduced, this is somewhere where we are not going to have an alignment, where we're going to be out of attunement. And the reason this matters, even in the quantum field, so even if we're talking the quantum terms that people have learned to use in terms of manifestation and so on and so forth, what I want us to become aware of is that if we haven't integrated, if we haven't looked at things in depth, if we haven't understood the self a little bit deeper, that follow-up isn't going to be there for many different reasons. And one of the reasons why is because the body is going to tell the truth. I'll wrap this up quickly because I want to hear your thoughts on this, and I want to know how you work through this. One of the things that I encountered in my personal life when I was going through my own deepest part of my healing, and really one of my many like underworld trips, right, was I had been leading a trip in Costa Rica. I was doing a retreat. And as part of that retreat, we were offering massages. And so I decided I was going to treat myself as well. It wasn't just like the attendees. I was going to also give myself a massage. Well, the guy that was giving massages was doing something very different. He wasn't doing muscle testing, but he knew exactly where each emotion lived in the body. And I will never forget. He got to one point on my leg. He just touched it. Like, it literally didn't even dig in. He wasn't doing anything crazy with it. It wasn't like a chiropractic adjustment, nothing. He just like touched with his finger, the lightest touch possible. And I have cried the hardest tears I have ever cried in my entire life in that moment. And he said to me, the body doesn't lie. And that just, and this is like years ago, but this registered so deeply within me that I was like, man, I know this, but I have never known it quite so presently as now. And what you're describing in terms of muscle testing is that. So for those of you who aren't familiar, muscle testing, you, for example, one way to do this is, say you want to know if you have a connection to an apple. And that sounds very abstract, but you'll grab an apple and they will, the practitioner will check, like, in your body, does this apple sit well with you? Yes or no, and depending on how your body reacts. So just to give you an example, and this is something that one of my healers and I used to do. So I would stick one of my arms out, I would hold the item in one hand, and she would push down on the arm. If the arm fell all the way through, there was a disconnect and that thing wasn't good for me, right? If the arm stayed strong, then okay, that's where we go. And so muscle testing is a similar thing that we can observe within ourselves. Like you said, am I telling the truth about this? The arm will go down if you're lying. Am I telling the truth about this? It'll stay. And so we can use that to help us manifest, and we can use that to help us heal more deeply. So I'm just echoing back what you said in a different way so that our listeners can sink their teeth deeper into this. So let's lean further into that conversation. Okay, so now we have Peter. Peter, who has been working with you for a little bit. And so during muscle testing, you realize, oh, there's subconscious programming at play here that is getting in the way of Peter actually showing up in the best way possible for his relationships, for his business, for himself. Like maybe he's sabotaging, right? So let's talk about that. What are the ways oftentimes that these systems will show up in our lives and how they are interfering with that quantum connection, right?
Well, for starters, when you have a belief system and an energy that is it drains basically at when you're with other people, when your belief system is all about nobody wants to spend time with me, that is the energy that you're putting out there. So it's happening again and again because you're literally bringing that situation into your life, because like energy, you're attracting that in again and again. And so he will have plentiful situations around him where he might be putting forward his ideas at work or whatever, and nobody is really interested, and they all skim over that, and then somebody else might say the same thing, and everyone's really interested. So these kind of situations will just be cycling around in his life, over and over again. And so, yeah, sorry, you asked something else.
Yes. No, I love that. I love that. Let's actually pause there and feed into that. So this is so, because you're right. That's kind of what I was asking. Like, how do we see this, right? What are the patterns? What are the things that can show up? A lot of times, for example, we see procrastination and we're like, oh, I'm just a procrastinator. I don't do. And it's not that we are ineffectual or lazy. It's that there are patterns underneath the surface that are informing everything else, to include the way in which our bodies, our minds, our energetic field are responding. And then, like you said, if I'm believing that I am just, okay, if Peter is believing that he just is ineffectual and nobody listens to him, and he's going to be coming across that more and more often. And the more evidence he receives, the more solidified it's going to become in his world. And the more he's going to unconsciously seek the people in his life that are actually not listening to him. Whereas there might be someone sitting right next to him fully paying attention, he's going to pay attention to the person that is ignoring him. And that's where we sometimes say, for example, in the world of relationships, that's where we sometimes hear people say, oh, you attracted the same kind of people. I hate that we use the word attract for that. Like, it drives me crazy. It's one of my biggest pet peeves. I'm like, we're not attracting the same people. There's nothing wrong with us, because that's what that infers. You're attracting this person, infers something wrong with you. I'm like, it's not that. It's that we recognize patterning. We recognize a similarity between how I was treated then versus how I'm getting treated now. And because it's similar and it feels comfortable to my subconscious self, whether it's good or not for me, it doesn't matter. I'm going to seek it out. And it's the same thing with Peter, right? So that's the kind of thing that we're talking about. Yep.
Exactly. And because Peter has blocked off his heart, because it's like, it hurts so much to have that. When somebody actually gives him attention and focus and asks his questions of him, he literally will kind of rejects it, because he's like, it's too, if I open up to that, I'll get hurt so deeply, and I can't make all of the changes in my life to make that a possibility. So I'll just stay with the familiar. It's safe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly. And so now this is the key component that most people will get stuck in and that want to know most about, but also that they're most afraid of. And it's that, how do we change this, right? I always say that the question of how gets us stuck. It gets us more stuck than liberated. However, if you ask it in a proper way, it does give you the path through. So what is it, right? Listen to the change for our listeners, or if you're watching this on the podcast, just listen, right? What is it that we can lean into? What are the tools? What are the ways? What are the questions? What are the things that we as sovereign beings can utilize to help shift that? Okay, I already know my subconscious patterning is doing this. We've done muscle testing. We've discovered this is what I'm putting into the quantum realm, and that's why I keep getting the same feedback back. Okay, what is the change? What makes the transformation?
So awareness is massive. You know, when we notice ourselves feeling triggered by something, when we notice that a pattern is repeating again and again, it's sitting with that and going, what's going on? What am I thinking here? What am I feeling here? What are the main emotions that are coming up? Let me understand this. When am I taken back to when I get into this mental space? And then as we make awareness with all of those old patterns, we are able to release them from that space. And intention is so huge in this world. You know, it's like, I will not show up like that anymore. I absolutely want to be this person. And so when we use awareness and intention and inspired action, these are the things that really start to make the shifts. And when we're doing that alongside doing quantum healing as well, magical things happen. But yeah.
I'm over here trying to clap, but of course I won't, for the sake of everyone's ears. But yes, I love it. So awareness, intention, inspired action. I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself. And that's really the way of acting in sovereignty. I mean, that is, we've talked about this several times before, obviously on the lifespan on the podcast, but that the times in our lives when we take a step back and just observe and decide to proactively move in a direction and to become aware of what is actually going on, that is when the creativity, that is when the inspiration, that is when everything changes. And that's where we start seeing those manifestations. Because here's the thing too, and we can talk about this, I would love to hear your thought on this. So as someone who loves working in the realm of the dark feminine, as a priestess of the dark feminine and everything, I love to talk about the in-between. The thing about the in-between world is that this is the realm of uncertainty. Like, it's very easy for us, I can kind of going back to the beginning of the pod where we were talking about the things that we sometimes misunderstand about quantum, right? One of the things that I think sometimes we misunderstand, because it's very marketable. I can market the fact that you can quantum leap your way into the next level version of yourself by following these 5 steps, right? That's very marketable and very profitable. I personally don't approve of this, but I'm just saying this is the way that we do things a lot in this world. I can do that. And by virtue of doing that, I'm telling people that the pathway through is sit down, make a vision board, look at the vision board every morning, think that you already have that and you're going to have the thing. And then what happens when you don't? And that is the thing. This is what we're talking about here today. It's okay, first of all, yes, we can do the things until we're blue in the face. But if we're not in the way of being about something, and if we're not in the way of observing, we're not in the way of questioning, we're not in the way of self-reflecting, we're not in the way of that awareness, we're not in the way of that presence of mind and that intentionality, things are going to get sticky. And the ability to hold the power of who I am, period. Regardless of whether I receive the thing or not, whether I get the dream or not, whether it comes in a different package or not. Because a lot of times you'll hear people reflect back that whole axiom of it's this or something better. We can say it's this or something better all we want, but what's going on internally? Am I internally going, no, it has to be this, and I'm digging my heels and it's going to happen, blah, blah, blah. And we haven't addressed the pattern, or have we changed it? And so we want to take a look at that reflection, and we want to take a pause, and we want to really be clear on it's not the doing of the thing. And it's also a lot to do with the power that we hold in that in between. And in that in between, because there's uncertainty, there's sometimes constriction. So I would love to hear your take on that and how it moves through the quantum field and the body and all the things.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And the problem is, just to add in, that people don't like to sit with the negativity when it comes up. You know, people reach for their phones and they're straight on social media and they distract themselves over and over. And we have to be able to do the hard thing. You know, we have to be able to say, this isn't comfortable, but you have to go through it in order to come out the other side. You can't distract yourself and hope that it will all just disappear. And that is what we as a society are doing over and over again. Yes. So I'm sorry.
No, that was great. I'm like here nodding furiously because I'm like, yes, so true.
So sorry, you said about manifesting. So yeah, I mean, the problem is that, yes, we can say, I want this to come in, but if our bodies don't believe it, and if we have put ourselves into protection mode, by which I mean shutting off our hearts, shutting off our ability to receive, if we are feeling that we need to protect ourselves from the world, then of course we can't bring in all of these things that we're saying out to the world that we want. You know, we're doing that from our conscious mind, not from our subconscious and from our energy bodies. All of that has to align for us to be able to bring in these things that we're saying we want to align with. And so however much we might say, I want this, if our body is saying it's not safe for me to receive all of these things, people treat me badly if I receive these things, people don't like me showing up in my success, or whatever that might be, then we are never going to allow it to happen. And that there can be a wealth of different reasons why people actually are resisting the very thing that they are saying to themselves that they want over and over. You know, I've worked with lots of people who are really wanting to have a relationship and are like, yeah, I'm totally open to it. And there is so much fear and resistance when it actually is put before them. And they create all sorts of conflicts and they push the very thing that they want away.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's so interesting the way that shows up. I think as humans, because we have spent so much of our lives focusing on just specific things, right? Relationships, finances, things like these are things that we immediately connect to. So these are things that like right away we can say, oh, this is the thing that I want. This is where I want to go. And the reason I'm bringing this up and hearing you talk about this is important because it's like this, when we want the thing and we're dogged after it, we haven't gone into the depth of the fullness, and we don't know how to hold the in-between, that place of like, okay, yeah, but I am safe here to receive it. Yes. Meaning I'm safe to receive the package it comes in, the timing. I'm safe to know that even if it doesn't show up for a while, or even if it doesn't show up in the way that I thought it would, or if I myself change directions, that doesn't mean that I'm wrong, that I'm bad, that I did the wrong things, blah, blah, blah. Like it's still, if you can hold that potency in the in-between, things get really magical. And you're right. The reason I was circling back to saying as a society, we focus on these things is because those are the tangibles that we understand. Like if we say, okay, if I'm going after the dream relationship, immediately everyone is already thinking, okay, what would that look like? What is my wedding dress going to be like? What are the flowers going to be like? Everybody can go very, very quickly to that place. And it's funny because in the building of that relationship, we tend to obfuscate and move aside the self. And then we also tend to hyper focus on the things that may not actually be in proper alignment, but that for some reason, the internal parts of self that we haven't had a full conversation with have ascribed very heavy meanings. And that's the same thing. That's the same conversation we've been having since we got started. So when you feel, to the listeners, when you feel like you are trying to manifest, when you feel like you are trying to attract, again, it's words that I sometimes try to stay away from because now we've developed really interesting relationships with them. But if you're trying to draw forth, magnetize, be in alignment with, be in attunement with, receive into your life something very specific, right? One of the things that we need to do is, like Kate and I have been saying, you want to get to know the self. You want to get very intentional. You want to get very present, right? You want to be very here in the moment of what's going on. And then you want to listen and you want to watch and respond. Let yourself be the responder to what is going on. And don't be so dogged about chasing after something in a way that you think this is the only thing. This is the only way. This is like, if I don't do it this way, it's going to crumble to pieces.
Absolutely. Yeah. The universe is full of surprises, and that's the amazing thing about it. But also another thing that you can do is you can, visualize yourself like fully being in that space that you're trying to create. So imagine yourself being deeply in a relationship, and not the wedding, not the the big, but the day to day. Imagine that amazing person before you and having a meal with them or whatever that might be. And it's really interesting how then when people are in that space, they suddenly go, oh, I don't feel safe. My nervousness I'm feeling really panicky. Or imagine the big money coming in and people are saying, oh no, that's too much. That only about this will work for me. And it's really interesting that when we actually put ourselves like fully into that visualization space, there's often a niggly, wobbly part of us that's like, no. And that tells us a lot about what we're pushing away. As well.
Yeah. And actually thinking back to, I'm so grateful that you brought that up, because also speaking deeper into the realm of and the understanding of quantum. That's the thing, is it quantum, right? It's huge. There is, like you said earlier, I think at the very, very beginning of the show, there are no limits. So that does mean our mind, our field, our energetic beingness, it just kind of taps into all of that. And the bigness of it, that's what sometimes really, really scares us, because it's holding that. That's what I mean about the in-between as well. It's holding that requires a big belief in yourself. It requires a big belief and a big understanding and a big recognition of when, where, how, and what is actually serving you at your highest good versus what it is that we are trying to comprise or compartmentalize or shrink down into something that we can control.
Totally. Because that's the thing. I mean, ultimately, our biggest fear is how big we can be in our full vastness, and in that space, people can feel like, well, there'd be nobody there. I'd be all alone because, I don't know anybody else who is as big as I potentially could get to. So let's just play small. Let's just talk about these little things that don't really matter and, shut it all away.
Yeah. And part of the conversation is, and I actually had another podcast recently where I talked about this, but it's the part of the conversation here is what your belief systems are about other people will reflect what you really believe about yourself. This is one of those things about the shadow work that most people don't talk about right now. I think, listen, I'm someone who loves to romanticize life. Obviously, I want people to live like romantic lives with themselves. I'm like, a love for the ages, but I don't use that word in the same way that it's utilized in a lot of other places. And so I think right now the romanticization of shadow work is this whole thing where it just looks pretty and bubble baths and candles and sage and blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, let's be very clear. Shadow work is really intense. You're getting to know parts of yourself that you have rejected, ignored, or bypassed for a very long time for good reasons sometimes. Like some of them are parts that are sharp and have an edge and are something that are not properly balanced or attuned, or that don't know how to be about personal ownership in a way that is going to be beneficial for you. So it just goes so much deeper than that. And the reason why that's important is because, for example, if I'm afraid of receiving money, what is it that I am saying about people who have money? Because this is something that we don't think about a lot, and it does affect the quantum field, right? I can sit here and say my I am statements until I'm blue in the face. I am wealthy, I am rich, I am blah, blah. Okay, great. And then if I look at a person who has a Ferrari and I judge them and I roll my eyes at them, right? Which I'm the queen of eye rolling, obviously. But if I roll my eyes at them and if I just say that person is evil, they're like little dick energy, or they're like, they're like, we see stuff like that. Then subconsciously, the conversations that we are having about self receiving wealth, or the same with love and relationships, right, are going to be very rife with inconsistency and are not going to necessarily align or open the pathway to receiving those things. They're not going to feel safe to the nervous system, like you said.
Yeah, absolutely, completely. I mean, my childhood was full of abuse and bullying and very difficult situations, you know, and lots of manipulation. And my whole being was a mess, really. You know, I was tight and tense. I was all my systems weren't working properly at all. You know, it showed up all over my body. My knees would give my way, my hips couldn't work properly, like all sorts, you know. And it's been a deep and long healing journey for me. You know, there's been a lot of darkness that I've needed to expose, but my goodness, I would not want it any other way. It's incredible to be able to release that pain and to, you know, to align your body to something that feels alive and joyful and true and in that love and peace space. And so you know, I love it when people just step towards that space and understand what is possible to be able to be released from ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's that, it's that bigness, you know, there is just that beautiful limitlessness to it. And I think that is important to tap into, because we've been taught, especially, and obviously I work with women, so a lot of the conversations that I have, I reflect back not just to the feminine, but to women, or, you know, feminine identifying individuals, but like, this is the realm that I inhabit. And so one of the things that I love about that is that honestly, we've been taught to shrink down for so long, we don't even know what that feels like generationally speaking. And you know very well about this. Like, it's just like we carry those generational wounds within us.
Absolutely. Yeah. And not only do we take in physical DNA, we take in energetic DNA, you know, of how we should be, and the things that we should be scared of and the things that we should be worried about. And so we have that from generations of women who have had to hide or who haven't been able to have a voice. So yeah, it's an amazing thing for us to be able to shift that fully and show up in all that we can be.
Absolutely. And it's part of the healing. You know, I think a lot of times, sometimes we get caught up in the idea that healing is only about, okay, I had this trauma, now I'm over it and it's done. And I never have to look back, and I'm just going to be happy for the rest of my life. And I'm not really entirely sure. I probably should do more research into that. I've just been focusing on other things, like, you know, in my, I don't know, 2 decades of doing this kind of work. But I don't know exactly where or why this is the thing that we like think that is the goal. But healing is this continual relationship with the self, of like continual observation. And sometimes, and I actually want to hear from you about this too, because this is something that I always tell people, and I think there is a cognitive bias here that doesn't allow us as humans to fully understand this, even though, yes, I know this in my mind, you know, it doesn't sink into my body. The following, it's that just because we are experiencing something similar doesn't mean that we haven't healed. It just means we are experiencing something similar and we can approach it in a different way.
Yes, that's exactly it. You know, so often a situation will come up where before we will have handled it completely differently, and this time we can show up with calm and strength and assertiveness, or we can show up just being able to go, oh, I recognize all of my patterns. Actually, I recognize that I'm called to do this, and I'm noticing this, and I'm actually going to respond differently. You know, that's when big change happens. And so when something comes in and you're like, oh, you know, some people might be like, why does this keep happening to me? But this is an opportunity to respond differently. This is an opportunity to start stepping back and releasing and getting aware of what's going on. And as you respond differently, that situation will stop coming into your life, because you'll stop bringing it into your life.
And it'll have a different impact. But I love that we're having this conversation again for the same reason. It's like we have that idea of like, okay, no, once I'm done, and I'm never going to have to do this again. But life doesn't work that way. And it's not. I heard someone once say something to the effect of like, oh, this is just universe testing you. And I hate that. I really wish that we could converse differently about things, because it's not that like universe is this psychotic, like I'm just going to punish you when I want to, and I'm going to test you anytime I get a chance to kind of being, right? It's not like that. It's just that life is cyclical, and also patterns are going to repeat. That's like a tree saying, why is it springtime again? I already bloomed once. I don't want to do this again. Why are you making me do this again? So it's the same thing, just in a different level. But this conversation is important for us to have, because again, it's like, now, okay, yes, you're going through something similar. It's not the same thing. It feels the same, I know.
Yeah.
But if you are now more aware, and we've spoken about awareness a lot in this conversation, but like if you're already aware, now you get the opportunity to change the way that you're going to respond. Or also too, you could choose to keep responding the same, and that doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't mean that you're unhealed. It just means like, okay, you're choosing to perpetuate a pattern. And that's just going to have not repercussions, but it's going to have following energetics to that. Like for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So you're just following the laws of the universe, right? In that sense. But I love this conversation again for those reasons, because it's not about like a one and done. And something that you said earlier, and I'm thinking about this now, something that you said earlier about the it's not efficacy, but the quickness with which we have become accustomed to receiving things. Listen, we're living in a really interesting day and age where if I just want to pick up my phone and have a conversation with an AI bot, I can trick myself into believing, and I really want people to listen to that. I can trick myself into believing that I no longer have to do the work of thinking things through. And this is why I believe it's important for us to be cognizant and aware, again, there's that word, of what it is that who we are when we are interacting with our world. It doesn't matter what part of the world, whether it's social media, whether it's AI, whether it's another person, whether it's a relationship. Who are you being when you are interacting with your entire existence? And if you are allocating your power to something outside of yourself, be it an AI, be it another person, be it a belief system, belief systems, but whatever it is, right? You are choosing to leave a part of yourself, the biggest part, off the table and off the conversation. And this is where we get into a lot of trouble internally.
Yeah, I agree. And, so many of us have this fear of losing ourselves because we have allowed ourselves to get lost into all of these things over and over and over again. It's a really difficult area, basically. And, that thing that you said of the same things coming up over and over again, this often I find is because we hold things in our cells, and first when we heal, we're working with the cellular structures mostly, and then we're working much more on an energetic level, and then we might work on a heart level, and then we move to a kind of soul level. So these patterns can be repeated over and over and over again. And it's like, this coming up again, but sometimes it's because we've moved to another depth of a layer of our being, and we're shifting it at that much deeper level. So it has a whole new impact on the way we show up.
Absolutely. And it's that choosing, it's that decision that makes the biggest difference, right? I can either choose to believe that if it's fast, it's good. And if it's like one and done, it's good. Or I can choose to lean into that. Exactly what you said. It's like, it's one more layer. It's one more staircase. Like I always, and this was not my specific example. This was a friend of mine's example, but she used the idea of like a stairwell that's like a spiral stairway. And having been to Europe and love these spiral staircases, I can tell you, that there does come a point where you're like, man, I feel like listen, I've been walking the same 2 steps for like 5 hours, and I've been looking out the same tiny window with the same view for like 5 hours. But no, it's not true. It's every couple of steps, it's higher, your view is bigger, etc. And so it's the same thing. But I love.
I was sent a video from someone that had it was someone with some steps next to a trampoline, and they go up 2 steps and then they fall off on the trampoline, and then they're having to climb up again, and it's like of the healing journey. And it can feel like that, but you just got to keep trusting that this isn't more of the same. It's new stuff coming up, and things can be buried so deeply in our subconscious. And if we've had patterns that have repeated over and over and over again, then they have to come up over and over again as we're releasing new traumas and as new parts are coming up to consciousness. And this is the beautiful thing. So as we are having more awareness of what's happening, the deeply buried parts of ourselves, which we will not allow to come into our consciousness, begin to percolate up. and we begin to have that sense of awareness and the depths of those subconscious traumas, which we may not be aware of, but they're absolutely intruding into our consciousness all of the time. We can then deal with them.
Yeah. It's something like 99% of the time. Your subconscious is running the game, right?
Yes,
unless you're
completely
aware of what's going on. And then, you actually said this, and I liked how you phrased it, but I forget the exact phrasing of it. It's then we have almost these like out of body experiences. I call them. Like, it's so funny. What I always tell my clients is you work through something, you learn, you develop a really good relationship with the self and observation. And in that awareness, what happens is this thing will come up again, right?
Yeah.
And as you're going through it, you'll almost have this out of body experience where you're like, oh, I'm responding this way, and I can see why I'm responding this way. And it just becomes so trippy because now you've got the bigger picture of something, and that actually can make the biggest difference. It doesn't necessarily mean that the outcome is going to be perfect or that you're going to be you yourself, picture perfect about doing things. But it does mean that now you've got a different point of view. And even if you do, quote unquote, screw the pooch or like mess things up or whatever, right? You still have a point of view now that you're like, okay, hold on. Because now I can see where this is interacting with this part. And what's showing up is this. Okay, well, I would rather choose better for myself. So next time I can, and that just informs things a little bit better. But it's this whole conversation, right? It's this whole realm of selfhood. You yourself you contain multitudes, and that's part of, for me, and this is a very personal Sapha thing. I'm not saying that any other scientists or researchers or anything has said this, but for me personally, this is part of the conversation of the quantum existence, is that I exist in multitudes. I, at any given point in time, can choose to lean into any version of myself that is going to be better suited to something. And I think there's real power in that, because it allows us, again, not just to have the bigger picture, but to choose again and to know that no matter what happens, that decision, whether we perceive it as right or wrong, good or bad, that decision was in my hands. I made that decision. And then I move forward with that. And then I keep choosing and I keep going on. So again, not to I bring it back to this because this is your realm of expertise, but like the quantum, right? The self itself is quantum, like it's limitless. It keeps, and it affects changes in many different ways. Those ripples, they span multitudes.
Yeah, and through generations, you hear as you shift your own quantum fields, it shifts in your children without you even, just as a process. It's amazing.
Yeah, and that's beautiful because we're healing. I think at the end of the day, we're healing globally. One of the reasons why so many of us have started becoming awake or aware or curious about these kinds of things now is because we are in the way of, if I'm choosing better for myself, you're going to know to choose better for yourself, and so on and so forth. It just becomes really beautiful ripple effects, like throwing a little pebble in the pond.
Absolutely. And we are shifting the quantum fields. So yeah, it's amazing.
I love that.
Would you like, shall we do some quantum healing?
Oh, yes, let's do it. I was going to say, I was like, anything else you want to do? Yes, there you go.
Let's try some.
Okay, so everyone who is listening to this on the pod, Kate has a beautiful gift for us. And what I'm just going to ask is that if you are driving, that you hit pause and do this later when you are somewhere safe by yourself where you can close your eyes. And Kate, if you have any other tips before we get going, that would be great.
Just be somewhere where you can relax deeply, where you won't be disturbed, where you can listen to what your body is telling you. All sorts of things will come up in your body during quantum healing, and keep listening.
Yeah, perfect. All right, well, I'll let you get us started.
Okay, so if everybody can just identify some way in which they are not asserting their power. We're talking about sovereignty here. So identify some way in which you are, maybe it's with a person or with a situation where you are letting somebody make decisions, or you are not charging what you should be charging, or whatever that might be. So just identify a situation. And if everybody can just close their eyes and visualize that situation, visualize that scenario. And as you are in that space, notice the emotions that are coming up. And notice the thoughts that are coming to mind. And notice where you're feeling that in your body. Maybe that's in your chest or maybe in your hands. It's probably showing up somewhere physically. And then just note down a number for the emotional response of that scenario for you out of 10. Okay, and then just keeping your eyes closed, just let go of that whole scenario from your mind and from your body. And I am going to work with your superconscious mind to release some of this for you. You don't need to worry about the words that I'm saying. This is all going to happen in the quantum level, so you can just let go and relax. You might find that as this works its way through, you have some physical sensations. You might find that your brain goes clear or sleepy. You might have some emotions come up. Just release and let it all go. It'll all pass its way through. Okay, so superconscious, please do a structure of associations procedure on I am powerful. And treat all the triggered parts. And we leave a bit of time between commands just for processing. Superconscious, please treat the broken agreements, unfinished communications, and conflicts. Superconscious, please treat the structure of all disempowering structures around the belief, what's the point? And then do a massive change history and everything else required. Superconscious, please treat the emotions in the statement, I am safe when I stick to familiar patterns. And then treat the content and the context and the key themes. And then do a structure of associations procedure on all of these. And then a massive change history. And superconscious, please treat the complex structure of beliefs until they are false. And treat all fear and resistance as you encounter it. And then do a massive change history and everything else needed. And superconscious, please treat the energetic DNA for if I show up in my power, something bad will happen. And superconscious, please tag and treat the memories causing disorganization. And superconscious, please tag and treat all I can't memory structures creating disorganization. And now, when you feel ready, just keeping your eyes closed for the moment, check in again on that original scenario with that person or situation. And notice what shows up now in your body. Are you still feeling that in the same place? Is there still the same emotional response? And what would you score that now out of 10? And then you can just open your eyes when you're ready.
I was gonna say something, but just give it a minute. Amazing. So for those of you who have never done anything like that before, to me, this is very similar to some of the work that I do. It's like internal parts or the work that I've done with other practitioners in terms of like EMDR and stuff. But similar, we're addressing parts of the self that we don't interact with on a conscious level, but it's a very powerful tool.
Absolutely.
Healing and reintegration. So that was seriously such a beautiful gift that you just gave everybody. So I want to thank you on behalf of everyone for that. That was lovely.
Well, I'm delighted to be here and give it.
Okay, so before I officially let you go, even though I don't want to, because this has been great, can you please just tell everyone where they can find you, how they can connect with you, all the goodies, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have an app which has 5 different programs on it, and each one of those programs has lots of quantum healing recordings to help people shift in all the ways that are blocking them from opening up to love or to conception or to be the entrepreneur that they need to be, and so on. So people can connect with me there. That's the Healing Place app. I don't do social media because for all sorts of reasons, but it doesn't work for me energetically, and I want to be in an energetic space which is expansive. So people can sign up to my newsletter, find me on LinkedIn. I would love to have chats with anybody. So email me and connect and let's talk.
Amazing. And I totally get that social media thing. But that was fantastic. Okay, thank you so much for your time, for your gifts, for the conversation. I hope to have you back again sometime soon. It was so good to have you here.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you so much for having me.